Well, and it is cumulative. What we know about the universe, adds up.
Yes, some of it's cumulative. Most of it isn't. Physics is more cumulative than any of the rest of it, chemistry, but the basic framework for how we're going to think about things changes so vastly that it doesn't matter how exact the details are. So in the 19th century, everybody measured heads.
Yeah, phrenology.
And phrenology was sort of disbelieved by mid-19th century. But in the end of the early 20th century, all over the Western world, universities were collecting skulls and measuring them and measuring their capacity. There's a great story behind that, which I was involved in fleshing out in my first book, The End of the Soul. But the point is that they thought they were being so exact in their measurements that they couldn't go wrong. But the point is, once your mind changes the overall program and says, look, I don't believe that skulls have anything to tell us about human beings' intelligence or anything fundamental, then all the measurements, and there are reams and reams. Go to an annex of any great library and you will find shelves and shelves and shelves of this data, of the relationship, the indices of the relationship between the long part of the face and the width of the face, all of it nonsense. So that those measurements, while they may have been exact, are useless anyway.
Because the questions shifted.
Because the questions shift to that degree. So whether or not a tomato or a kiwi will prolong your life is a reasonable question, even though it may come with tremendous flaws that we can't see. And lots of people who talk about the way statistics and studies can be shifted will explain how these kinds of mistakes can be made. So that some aspect of eating this is good for you, but some other is bad. Even perhaps that it pollutes the world, and so you end up dying faster because transporting kiwis from the other side of the world becomes more unhealthy. There's a million ways that we can ask whether these studies make sense, but what's more extraordinary is whoever said longevity should be what our scientists should be spending so much of their time digging out. Of course, I'm speaking in terms of my
your latest book,
The Happiness Myth.
But which I loved so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I don't want to gush too much. I'll get emails about how I'm not being critical in the interview, but yeah.
Thank you, though. I find that even science is open to all sorts of this kind of questioning of the cultural setup, and not always in the silly ways that people think, gendered physics. Well, we did find some things by asking certain kinds of gendered questions, but for the most part, that's not what I'm really speaking to.
The doubt you're talking about, you said it's bigger than just being open-minded that a claim could be wrong. It reminds me of Andrian's line that the universe, in this cosmic sense, you look at cosmic time and kind of our place in the universe is saying, hey, you're really new at this knowledge thing. You may be mistaken. You've been wrong before. In other words, everything for you, it sounds like you're saying most everything should be up for grabs, that we have these biases. You talked about temporal biases, etc.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, there are ways to proceed. You can compare centuries and say, oh, look, the physics holds up pretty well. And you can then put more of your bet on certain types of things. We have a great deal of historical record and can look back and say what types of things are consistent. There have been a lot of other tries, but monogamy tends to be one that just keeps coming back, even though people always think that one sounds really cultural. But you can look across the historical record and ask questions. Now, the funny thing with that in terms of religion is that religion never stays the same for a decade. The things they believe certainly don't hold still for over a century. And
religion itself is evolving, yeah.
Religion's always evolving. Each individual religion is evolving and is revolving in response to the doubters' questions. It finds another way to talk so that they can't get you on that. But the basic problem with religion is so much more fundamental than with most of the other attempts to get understanding that it really is in a category all by itself. That's bad and good for it. Mostly bad in terms of truth-seeking. We can say mostly this is hogwash. On the other hand, for me, the best way to get to truth is poetry. And by poetry, I mean art and psychoanalysis and meditation and a lot of different ways that human beings have learned to try to take themselves out of the equation. We tend to see things only from our perspective, but there are different methods of training yourself to get a bird's eye view of things, to see a bigger picture, to take your own desires out a little bit of the question. That can be tremendously useful just that way.
Now, I can buy into that, but you threw so much out there just now that the hardcore skeptic's going to say, oh my gosh, she's advancing psychoanalysis and poetry and all this kind of ethereal, feel-good type stuff. And the hard-nosed skeptic wants to hear that's bunk, and the other thing's bunk, and I'm right, and here's why. But so your skepticism, the kind of doubt you're talking about, it seems to me at the same time a corrective of that kind of knee-jerk doubting on the one hand, and also a response to kind of hyper-credulity on the other hand.
Let me get my back firmly against religion and tell you no to religion. However, I think that the social functions of religion are very nice, and I think the new atheism has been inconsistent. Most of these new atheists will happily go to their sister's wedding in a church, and we have to ask ourselves questions. So what function is that providing in the family? Should we try to keep the ritual? Should we try to keep some of these things and yet make it so we don't lie when we go there? And there are humanist groups that do that kind of thing, and there are religious groups who have excised God. Of course, they're rather extreme, but that's what I'm speaking to.
And there are also just kind of moderate secular Jews who still go to temple because they like the community or something.
Yeah, but I guess I'm speaking a little farther. I'm saying that what I would propose would be to not go someplace and say things you don't believe. To find a way to go and say things you do believe. And if you can't, then to change the community you're in, to say that you want a service that doesn't go in that direction. And if you can't get it, then yes, to move on.
Just real quick, Jennifer, to get back to kind of your take on doubt. For you, it doesn't seem like it's something that leaves you hungry. It's in fact kind of a nourishing, a satisfying way to live, a poetical way to live. There's a surprising amount of joy that comes from the doubt that you're pushing.
Yeah, absolutely. I see the life of someone who's able to see the mystery of life but not fill it in with known answers, and not to see mystery as something which is a puzzle that needs an answer, but to understand that given our position in this world, it's the most philosophically attuned way to go forward. But it doesn't have to feel in the least bit like there's something that you're missing. Because a real understanding of the world around us sort of shows us that it's logically impossible to have it all, to understand everything. So to be in a comfortable state of wondering and learning, it seems to me a more glorious position, and yes, absolutely more ecstatic, joy-filled position.
So knowing's a good thing, but also not knowing is okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we all believe that our parents know everything when we're at a certain age, and we move on not to believe that some other guru or God knows everything, but to understand that life is not one of those things you get to know the answers to all the time, and we all learn how to play with that and enjoy that. And it seems there's no reason not to extend that to the heavens.
I'd like to let our listeners know that you can get a copy of Doubt, The Great Doubters and Their Legacy of Innovation from Socrates and Jesus to Thomas Jefferson and Emily Dickinson through our website, pointofinquiry.org.